I married my brother, but I didn't know, and we've had 3 beautiful children, only to discover the truth too late. Nandi was a 25-year-old lady, full of life, and a natural beauty that captured the attention of anyone who crossed her path. Her small boutique in the city of Yabu was her pride and joy. She had always dreamed of owning her own business, and after years of hard work, it was finally becoming a reality. In her store, women of all ages came to find shoes and ready-to-wear outfits that made them feel confident and stylish. But Nandi's journey hadn't been an easy one. Raised by a single mother, she had never known her father. Her mother had done everything she could to provide for her and her younger sister. The family's life had been simple but good until a tragic event turned everything upside down. A devastating fire at the fabric business her mother owned destroyed all their stock, leaving them with nothing. Nandi had been just a teenager then, and the fire had shattered her mother's spirit. But Nandi was different. She was tough, determined, and resolute. She refused to let the tragedy define her. She stepped up for her family. In the years that followed, she started a new business selling ready-to-wear clothes and shoes, this time focusing on high-quality, fashionable pieces that her customers loved. Business was slow at first, but she never gave up, and within a few years, her store had gained a loyal customer base. Nandi had finally made it. Or so she thought. One fateful Monday morning, Nandi walked into Nelo Microfinance Bank in search of a loan to expand her business. The bank was near her store, and she had heard good things about their customer service. Nandi had carefully prepared the necessary documents and, with a smile, walked up to the customer service desk. "Good morning, madam," the customer service officer greeted her warmly. "How can I assist you today?" "I'm here to inquire about a loan," Nandi replied, her voice calm and composed, despite the excitement bubbling inside her. She knew this was a crucial step to growing her business. The customer service officer smiled and nodded. "Let me direct you to Gabriel. He's the account officer who handles business loans like yours." When Nandi stepped into Gabriel's office, she was met with a warm smile. Gabriel was in his mid-30s, tall, with a calm demeanor that immediately made her feel at ease. But there was something about his gaze, the way his eyes lingered a little too long on her, that made her feel a rush of self-consciousness. "Good morning, madam," Gabriel said, standing up to greet her. "How can I help you today?" Nandi smiled politely, slightly flustered by the way his eyes seemed to study her every move. "I'm here to inquire about a business loan. I own a small boutique, and I'm looking to expand." Gabriel nodded, his interest aroused. "I'd be happy to assist you with that," he said. As he went over the details of the loan process, Nandi noticed how easy he was to talk to. There was something about his voice, calm, confident, that made her feel like she could trust him instantly. The loan process was smooth, and Nandi quickly completed all the necessary paperwork. Over the following weeks, the loan was approved, and she used it to expand her boutique, bringing in new stock and renovating the space. Business boomed even more, and Nandi's small shop quickly became the talk of Yabu. But what neither she nor Gabriel could have anticipated was that their professional relationship would quickly blossom into something more. After the loan was approved and Nandi's business was growing, she and Gabriel found themselves talking more often. It started with casual conversations about the business and the market, but soon, their interactions became more personal. Gabriel began visiting her store, not just for work but to check in on her. They shared lunches, discussed their personal lives, and in no time at all, Nandi found herself drawn to Gabriel in a way she hadn't expected. Gabriel was kind, attentive, and charming in ways that made Nandi feel special. She had been through a lot in her life, and it was refreshing to meet someone who made her feel valued. She'd been focused on building her business for so long that she hadn't really thought about her personal life. But Gabriel's gentle attention made her realize that maybe, just maybe, there was room for love in her life after all. Gabriel, for his part, was captivated by Nandi. Her beauty, intelligence, and strength drew him to her. But it wasn't just her physical appearance that attracted him. There was something about her resilience, her drive to succeed despite the obstacles she'd faced. Gabriel had always admired strong women, and Nandi was no exception. Within months, their relationship grew from professional to personal. They went on a few dates, shared moments of laughter and joy, and eventually, their bond deepened into love. Gabriel was head over heels for Nandi, and he couldn't stop talking about her to his friends and family. He had never been this serious about anyone before, and he knew deep down that Nandi was the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. After a year of dating, Gabriel asked Nandi to be his wife, and she, joyfully and without hesitation, agreed. The couple's wedding was a beautiful affair, attended by family and close friends. It was the start of a new chapter in both their lives. Gabriel, who worked his way up in his career, had received multiple promotions, and Nandi's business was flourishing. Their future seemed bright, and the world was at their feet. As life went on, they were blessed with 2 beautiful daughters. It was a happy and peaceful home. Gabriel, however, harbored a secret desire, one that, unknown to him, if revealed, could destroy everything. Gabriel was born out of wedlock. His mother had raised him with the support of her husband, Gabriel's stepfather. His mother had told him that his biological father was still alive, but Gabriel had never met him. Gabriel had grown up with his stepfather, who had accepted him as his own, and in many ways, Gabriel considered him his real father. But as the years passed, the curiosity about his biological father and his whereabouts tormented Gabriel. What kind of man was he? Why had he never been part of my life? These questions began to weigh heavily on his mind, and when Nandi became pregnant with their 3rd child, a son, Gabriel decided it was time to trace his father. While Nandi was deep into her pregnancy, Gabriel quietly began his search. He looked through old family records, spoke to distant relatives, and even hired a private investigator to track down the man. It wasn't easy, but after months of searching, Gabriel finally found him. His biological father was alive, living in a small town not far from Yabu. Gabriel was elated but also nervous. He hadn't told Nandi about his search, wanting it to be a surprise. He dreamed of a perfect moment, the grand reveal at their son's naming ceremony. The naming ceremony was an important occasion in their family, a joyous celebration of their newest arrival. Gabriel figured this would be the ideal time to introduce his biological father to everyone. He would stand up, make the announcement, and then watch as the pieces of his family finally came together. What Gabriel didn't anticipate, however, was how much the truth would affect everything. The day of the naming ceremony arrived. Nandi had just given birth to their beautiful son, and the entire family gathered at their home to celebrate. Gabriel's parents, his siblings, and their friends filled the house, creating a festive atmosphere. Nandi's mother and sister were there too, eager to welcome the newest member of the family. Nandi, still adjusting to life with a newborn, was busy with her mother as they prepared for the ceremony. Gabriel, on the other hand, was quietly nervous, knowing the time had come to reveal his long-held secret. He had arranged for his father to stay in a separate room until the moment was right. As the ceremony progressed, Gabriel's excitement grew. He couldn't wait to see the expressions on everyone's faces when he introduced his biological father. He took a deep breath, stood up, and motioned for his father to come into the room. And then, something strange happened. The moment Gabriel's biological father stepped into the room, everything changed. The atmosphere shifted. Nandi's mother gasped and collapsed to the floor, her face pale as a sheet. Nandi's heart skipped a beat. Gabriel's mother let out a loud cry and staggered backward, as if struck by something unseen. Confusion spread through the room like wildfire. Gabriel's family stared in shock. Nandi's family exchanged nervous glances. Gabriel's father, looking uneasy, stood before them all and began to explain, his voice shaking. What he revealed next would leave everyone stunned. The room was thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were closing in on the family. Gabriel stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest, as he watched the reactions of his family. Nandi, standing beside him, looked like she had just seen a ghost. Her eyes were wide, filled with shock and disbelief, and her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. Nandi's mother had collapsed to the ground in a faint. Gabriel's own mother had stumbled back, as if struck by a blow to the chest. What is happening? What is this? Gabriel's mother's voice cracked, her face in utter shock, her eyes wide with confusion. Gabriel turned to face her, his throat tight with emotion. Mama, this is my father. The man I've been searching for. The one who... His words faltered as he looked at the man standing quietly beside him. His biological father was tall, with graying hair and a strong build that suggested a life of hard work. But it was his eyes, haunted, distant, that sent a cold shiver down Gabriel's spine. This man, the one who had abandoned him and his mother all those years ago, was now standing in their home, and everything was about to change. Gabriel's father opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say a word, Nandi's mother, still lying on the floor, let out a soft sob. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. What is going on here? She whispered, her voice trembling. Gabriel. Nandi. This is... Nandi's heart raced as she bent down to help her mother. She could barely process the words. The room was spinning, and her mind refused to make sense of what she had just heard. How could this be? She whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. How could this man be? The words hung in the air like an unspoken truth, but Gabriel's father, looking distressed, finally found his voice. I know this is hard to understand, he began, his voice deep and measured, but what I'm about to say is the truth. Many years ago, I was in relationships with two women at different times in my youthful days. Your mother, he said, looking at Gabriel's mother, and your mother, he said, turning to Nandi's mother. Gabriel's mother gasped, her hand covering her mouth in disbelief. Nandi's mother had risen to her feet by now, her face contorted with a mix of pain and anger. No, Nandi's mother said, shaking her head. No, that's impossible. You. I denied both of you, Gabriel's father continued, his eyes lowering in regret. I was young, reckless, and selfish. I wasn't ready for responsibility. I didn't want to face the consequences of my actions, and I ran away from both of you. Gabriel's blood ran cold. The truth of his birth, of the circumstances surrounding his conception, was beginning to sink in. He had always known that he was born out of wedlock, but to hear it like this, to have it spoken so bluntly, was like a slap to the face. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. I've spent years trying to come to terms with my mistakes, Gabriel's father continued. I know it doesn't change anything, but I regret abandoning you both. I never meant to cause harm. I never meant for you to grow up without a father. But here we are, years later, and the truth has finally come to light. I am so ashamed of myself. Nandi's heart ached as she listened to the man speak. She couldn't look at him. She felt betrayed, torn apart by the truth that had just shattered her world. The man she had married, the father of her children, was a half-brother. What will become of their family, their marriage, and everything they have built as a couple? Gabriel stood rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. This was not how he hoped things would go. This was the truth he had been searching for, but he had never anticipated it would come crashing down like this. Gabriel, Nandi finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Are you telling me that you and I were? Gabriel could barely bring himself to look her in the eye. His heart was breaking. The weight of it all was unbearable. He had married the woman he loved, and now he was being told they shared the same blood. How could they have known? How could anyone have known? They had been so happy together, so in love. How would they explain this to their children? To their families? How would they move forward from here? The room was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the soft sobs of Nandi's mother, who had collapsed into her sister's arms. Gabriel's mother, too, had tears streaming down her face, and Gabriel couldn't help but notice the look of guilt and shame in her eyes. I'm sorry, Gabriel's mother whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I never wanted this for you, son. I didn't know. I didn't know the truth either. I just wanted you to be happy. Nandi's sister, who had been standing in the corner, spoke up, her voice trembling. What does this mean for you two? What happens now? The question hung in the air, and for the first time, Gabriel and Nandi were left speechless. What did this mean for them? How could they continue their marriage knowing the truth? How could they ever explain it to their children? After a long silence, Nandi stood up, her face pale and her eyes clouded with confusion. I don't know what to say, she whispered. I need time. I need time to process all of this. Gabriel nodded silently. He knew that Nandi needed space, but it felt like his entire world was crumbling before him. He had dreamed of introducing his father to his family, but now, all his dreams had turned into a nightmare. As the guests began to leave, the atmosphere grew colder. The joy of the naming ceremony had been replaced with an uncomfortable silence. People exchanged awkward glances, unsure of what to say. No one knew how to process the shock they had just witnessed. Gabriel and Nandi retreated to their bedroom, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them both. Nandi sat on the bed, her face buried in her hands. Gabriel paced the room, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Nandi finally whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Why didn't you tell me what you were planning? She cried. Gabriel stopped pacing, his eyes filled with pain. I didn't know, he said softly. I didn't know it would end up like this. I never meant for this to happen. Nandi looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. I love you, Gabriel. But this is too much. How do we even begin to explain this to our children? How do we tell them that their father and mother are siblings? Gabriel could feel his own tears welling up, but he fought them back. I don't know, he whispered. But we have to figure it out. For them. For our children. Days passed, but the silence between Gabriel and Nandi remained. They barely spoke, each lost in their own thoughts, unable to find the right words. Gabriel's father had left, disappearing without a trace, and no one knew what to do next. The secret that had been buried for so long was now out in the open, and no one was sure how to move forward. One evening, Gabriel sat down with his mother. She had been silent for days, her eyes downcast, and Gabriel knew it was time to ask the hard questions. "Mama," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "how did this happen? Why didn't you look for my father long ago? This could have been avoided." His mother looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "He didn't want you, Gabriel," she whispered. "It was devastating for me to raise you alone. Then I met and married your stepfather, who has been such a loving husband and father." "I am so sorry," she said. Gabriel swallowed hard, his heart heavy. "So, what do I do now? How do I fix this? How do I make things right?" His mother reached out and took his hand. "You can't fix the past, Gabriel. But you can control your future. If you love Nandi, you need to be honest with her. You need to talk to her. Be there for her. And most of all, be there for your children. They are the ones who need you the most right now." Gabriel nodded, the weight of his mother's words sinking in. He had spent so much time searching for answers about his father, but he had never considered the consequences of the truth. Now, his family was fractured, and the love he had for Nandi was threatened by something he could never undo. The aftermath of the naming ceremony had left everyone in a state of shock, with emotions running high and answers feeling just out of reach. Gabriel and Nandi, unable to escape the weight of the truth, found themselves locked in a silent, suffocating space where words failed them. Their world, once built on love, now seemed fragile and shattered. But what no one knew was that the truth of their connection wasn't as clear-cut as it seemed. Days had passed since the devastating revelation. Nandi's mother, Bolly, had fallen silent, retreating into herself. Gabriel and Nandi, though still physically present, had grown distant from one another. The joy of their newborn son was overshadowed by the uncertainty clouding their family. Their bond was strained, and it felt as though the walls of their home were closing in. Nandi and Gabriel started feeling very left out as the news of their story spread all over Yuba. People began to gossip about them anywhere they went, whether it was in the busy market or inside the mall. The kind smiles and warm greetings they used to enjoy had now turned into sharp stares and quiet murmurs. Even going out for simple things became stressful because strangers would point fingers, and neighbors would act funny around them. The couple, who were once well liked in the town, now felt like they didn't belong anymore. Gabriel, desperate to make sense of all that has happened, turned to his best friend, Michael. Michael had been his confidant for years, the best man at his wedding, and a witness to the chaos of the naming ceremony. Gabriel poured his heart out. "What should I do? I don't want to lose my marriage. I love Nandi so much," he cried as he spoke. Michael listened intently before responding. "Why not take a test to confirm if these claims are true? Then you'll know how to proceed." The suggestion hit Gabriel like a light bulb moment. "You're right," he said, a glimmer of hope returning to his eyes. "I didn't even think of that. I'll try to convince Nandi to come with me to the hospital." "Thank you so much, Michael." The couple decided to use a hospital outside Yuba where no one knew them. These were serious, trying times, and Gabriel was determined to protect their family. A private test was arranged. Once it was done, Gabriel and Nandi returned home to wait for the results, which would be delivered by courier. Gabriel and Nandi hadn't told anyone about the test. They didn't want to give false hope or add to the confusion. But they had to know. The truth, whatever it was, had to be medically proven. The results arrived sooner than expected. Sitting alone in their dimly lit bedroom, Gabriel and Nandi stared at the envelope, too scared to open it. The name of the lab, Genetics Institute, Private Testing, was printed on the outside. Gabriel turned to Nandi and said, "What could be worse than what we already know?" He tore the envelope open. As their eyes scanned the document, shock gripped them both. Gabriel wasn't Nandi's half-brother. The man she had married wasn't related to her by blood. Relief washed over them. Gabriel and Nandi hugged each other tightly, repeating, "We're not siblings." Relief and joy mixed with the lingering pain of betrayal. The past months had been emotionally and mentally draining, but for the first time, they felt a glimmer of hope. However, they knew they couldn't ignore the revelations about Nandi's mother's past. That evening, Gabriel and Nandi sat across from Nandi's mother in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Her hands trembled as she clutched her mug of tea. "Mama," Nandi began, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." She looked up, her eyes weary. "What is it, Nandi?" Gabriel took a deep breath. "We did a DNA test, Mama. The test result came in 3 days ago. We know I'm not Nandi's half-brother. This means Tumi isn't her biological father." The color drained from Nandi's mother's face. Her hands tightened around the mug. I don't know what to say." Nandi's voice rose, her pain evident. "Mama, how could you keep this from me? All my life, I've lived with many half-truths. Why didn't you ever tell me the full story of my life? I had every right to know." Nandi mom's eyes filled with tears. "I was young, Nandi. Reckless. I made mistakes, and I've spent my whole life trying to make up for them. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me." Nandi's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what this has done to us? To my marriage?" Many years ago, Nandi's mother said, "I had fallen pregnant with her first child, Nandi. The circumstances were far from ordinary. I had been in a complicated relationship, dating 2 men simultaneously, neither of whom knew about the other. Those days had been wild and reckless, a carefree blur of passion and poor decisions. One had miscalculated who Nandi's father truly was. Back then, DNA tests were not as accessible as they are now. One had simply assumed the man she'd been with the longest, her then boyfriend, Tumi, Gabriel's biological father, was the father. I did my best to convince myself that everything lined up. But the truth, as it often does, had been buried beneath layers of time, regret, and guilt. When Tumi, Gabriel's biological father, denied being the father, I was left to raise Nandi alone. I worked tirelessly, starting a fabric business to provide for daughters. My youthful recklessness had left me a single mother, and I have carried the weight of my choices for decades." Gabriel placed a reassuring hand on Nandi's mother's shoulder. "Mama, we are not here to judge you. But we need the truth. Who is Nandi's biological father?" Nandi's mother's sobs filled the room. "His name was Richard. He was a traveling musician. We were together for a short time, and then he left. I never saw him again." The room fell silent. The weight of her confession hung heavy in the air. Nandi felt a mix of anger, sadness, and pity for her mother. "Mama," Nandi said softly, "I need time to process this. But I need you to know that I love you. I just wish you had told me the truth." She cried as she left the living room. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations and heartfelt apologies. Gabriel and Nandi knew that staying in Yuba, surrounded by the whispers and judgment of others, wasn't an option. They needed a fresh start, a place where they could heal and rebuild their lives. One evening, Gabriel turned to Nandi and said, "Let's leave Yuba. Let's start over somewhere new. For us, and for our children." Nandi nodded, tears in her eyes. "I think that's the best decision for our family." With heavy hearts but hopeful spirits, they packed their belongings and prepared to leave. On the morning of their departure, Nandi's mother hugged them tightly. "I'm so sorry for everything," she whispered. "I hope you find the peace you deserve." As Gabriel, Nandi, and their 3 children drove away from Yuba, they felt a sense of liberation. The road ahead was uncertain, but they were determined to face it together. Their love, tested by unimaginable trials, had emerged stronger. And though the past would always be a part of their story, they were ready to write a new chapter, one filled with hope, healing, and endless possibilities. The gentle hum of the countryside and the warmth of their new community provided the perfect environment to heal. Their home, modest but filled with love, became a sanctuary where they could finally leave the shadows of the past behind. Just like Gabriel's birth father and Nandi's mom, the past has a way of catching up with us, no matter how hard we try to bury it. Our actions, decisions, and secrets may seem like they have no consequences, but the truth always finds its way to the surface. Hope you enjoyed this story. Please comment, like, subscribe to our channel and share with friends.